Shabbat Shalom. I'm Rabbi Alan Tufts, and I'm speaking to you from my study here at Temple Bethel in Hollywood, Florida. Our Torah portion for this Shabbat is Pinchas, and it begins in the 25th chapter, verse 2 of the book of Numbers. Now, if you happen to have the URJ Torah commentary, the revised edition, you can find it on page 1074. This morning I stopped off to see a friend of mine, Reverend Kennedy McGowan, who is the pastor of the First Presbyterian Church in Hollywood. He's a neighbor of mine and a good friend of mine. And I saw this on his desk. It is a can, a rather beat up old can of Popeye spinach. And I said, I haven't thought about Popeye since I've been a kid. We both had a laugh about it. I said, well, what do you have it for? He said that he had used it in a sermon to speak about people who find their foundational values. You know, when people who normally make a lot of compromises in life find that there's certain things that they can't compromise. And what has that got to do with Popeye? He said, you know, Popeye is portrayed, the cartoon character is portrayed as a guy who is pretty easygoing until someone he cares about is being abused, whether it's Olive Oyl being kidnapped by Bluto or even himself being abused by someone, and he says, I just can't stand it no more. And what does he do? He pops open his can of spinach and he saves the day. Well, this week's Torah portion carries on, or concludes, a story that was begun in last week's Torah portion, in which a person by the name of Pinchas, the son of Eleazar, who was the son of Aaron, was confronted in such a situation in which he, as Popeye might have said, I just can't stand it no more. And he takes action because there are certain things that just can't be compromised. Last week's Torah portion told us about Balak, the king of Moab, who had engaged Balaam, a famous soothsayer, to curse the Israelites. And of course he does not succeed. Every time he opens his mouth, he can only bless the Jews. Balak, who is too terrified to confront the Israelites militarily, takes another tactic, uses another tactic. He brings in beautiful Moabite and Midianite women to seduce the Israelite men. Now, it's not just about sexual seduction. It's also about seducing them away from the God of Israel, to worship Baal Peor, who was the local god of the Moabites. And we read that Pinchas sees this happening. He sees this large group of Israelite men cavorting with the Moabite and Midianite women and worshiping other gods. And he feels that after all that God had done, that the God of Israel had done for our people, he can't take it. So he tracks down one of the leaders, one of the Israelite leaders, a man by the name of Zimri, who was a priest of the tribe of Shimon. And when he is with his Midianite mistress by the name of Cosbi, Pinchas takes his javelin, his spear, and he stabs them both, kills them both. And this is where this week's Torah portion opens up. Pinchas is granted what is called a brit shalom, a covenant of peace, a treaty of friendship with God, in which he is promised the priesthood of Israel, and all of his descendants would be occupants of the priestly office. Now, what we see here is an act of violence that most of us feel a little bit uncomfortable with. And it's been pointed out that that Pinchas, although his intentions are good and his zeal for God is good, even God is a little bit ambivalent about it, inasmuch as he has to wait to this week's Torah portion to receive his reward. I think the lesson, at least the lesson that I take from away from Pinchas, and I think Pinchas has many lessons to give us, is the following one. We modern Jews make lots of compromises to make our way through this world. We make compromises as human beings and compromises as Jews. As Jews, we have to make compromises in terms of our holiday observance, our dietary laws, about the Sabbath and other things. We make compromises about some of the things we see in the world that aren't quite right, and yet we don't get involved in making them better. But there has to come a time in everyone's life, whether it's on a religious level or just as a human being, where we say, as Popeye might have said, "I just can't stand it no more." That there has to be a foundation, there has to be a bottom line, that we just don't go past. Certain things cannot be compromised. We as Jews have to decide for ourselves what sorts of things we will compromise and what sorts of things we just will not compromise. And as human beings, when we see injustices in the world, we have to decide on which ones we just will not abide, that we will take a stand and we'll do something about. The challenge that I leave you with for this Sabbath is to find those foundational values of Judaism in your practice, in your beliefs, that you will not compromise, and find those values and those situations in your life in general that you will not compromise and that you will stand steadfast in your values. Shabbat Shalom.